Welcome once again to Breakfast Central. We begin in South Africa, where Agri SA, which is South Africa's largest agricultural organization, has warned that the country is facing a food crisis as a result of a continued and escalating load shedding. And they say the South African government is doing nothing to alleviate the situation. According to Agri SA CEO Christo Rheede, South Africans have begun seeing lower supply of certain food items on the shop shelves. And the problem would only worsen unless strong initiatives are put in place to protect food producers. Consumers in the country have already experienced the greatest level of food inflation in 14 years.
The country's official statistics body Stats SA recorded a 14% food inflation in March, with the sector being the key driver of headline inflation, moving higher rather than slowing as expected. Now, joining us this morning to discuss this further is the CEO of Agri SA, Christo Rheede. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. It's always a privilege to engage with you on critical matters such as food security.
All right. Now, from the reports we're seeing, according to Stats SA, we're seeing that this is South Africa is experiencing the worst inflation in the past 14 years, especially in the area of food. And some of the conversations we've seen surrounding this food crisis would be that load shedding is a major contributor. Are there other angles to perhaps look at this from? Would you say that there are other contributors to South Africa's current food crisis?
Yeah, there's a number of factors, but load shedding is the biggest driver of food inflation at this point in time. We've seen a massive spike in the price of vegetables. Now, you all know that vegetable farmers rely on irrigation. But if there's no electricity, you cannot operate your irrigation systems. So farmers have cut back on their plantings, and the number of hectares that they planted in the past are now smaller due to load shedding. So this in itself poses a serious challenge, especially for food supplies and also for the availability of food on the shelves. We've also seen that many shops do not or cannot take in more meat, for example, meat products and other perishable products, because due to load shedding and due to the cost of sourcing in alternative energy producing mechanisms such as diesel generators and solar panels, they cannot keep a lot of perishable stock in their cold storage facilities, and that at the end of the day leads to food shortages on the shelves, which pushes up the price of food.
All right, really scary. And the South African government has implemented some regulations that recognize food production and food storage facilities as essential infrastructure.
Indeed.
Do you think this? Go ahead, Mr. Rheede. I wanted to ask if any of these moves will bring about the change or would help the situation. Because, making them essential infrastructure, does that keep them away from the power cuts or make them less susceptible to power cuts? And, talk also about the food producers. How do they also survive the situation?
So Agri SA has been engaging with Eskom. We've been engaging with government. We've made government aware of the challenge of food insecurity. And, food insecurity and food inflation can lead to social instability in any country. Now, South Africa has been very fortunate in that we've got a very advanced commercial agriculture system, and our farmers produce enough food. So at farm level, there's enough food. We've had a very good maize production here. We've also had a very good soya production here. And we've got ample food, at farm gate level. The bigger challenge, obviously, is throughout the rest of the value chain, where food must be processed, whether it's meat, whether it's maize. Maize cannot be sold just like that. It needs to be processed into maize meal. And the same with meat. You're not going to deliver a sheep or a cow at somebody's door. It needs to be packaged. There's a cold storage facility that must maintain the integrity of the food and the quality of the food. And this is the kind of engagement that we have had with government over time. Now, a Minister of Electricity has been appointed, but it seems to me the Minister of Electricity does not have any legislative framework on which he can execute his mandate. And we need the president to solve this matter as soon as possible. And then in addition, we are engaging again today with Eskom on finding solutions for sorting out the challenge, especially at grassroots level, where we need to perhaps look at how do you give or provide lower load shedding levels, especially to your farm producing sector.
I mean, it's interesting that you say that the Minister of Electricity cannot perform his mandate because of certain maybe bureaucracy, I will put it in that way, and you're calling on the president. But, let's have a picture. I would like you to give us a picture of what this means, this crisis. What does it mean for individuals, for businesses, and how are people impacted? We know that there might be job losses, but can you paint a picture for us on what this would mean for everyone in South Africa?
Yeah, it's disastrous. Remember, it's not just the food producing sector that suffers. It's also all the other sectors, the mining sector, the motor manufacturing sector, your small businesses. You can just imagine, you're a small business, you need to operate your business, your restaurant, and now you sit with load shedding level 6. We were promised by the Minister of Electricity and all the presidency that load shedding will be soon something of the past. But now they can't even give us a guarantee that load shedding level 6 will be lowered to load shedding level 2 or a more bearable load shedding level. Luckily for us, we've had good rains, and that helps a lot with farmers becoming less reliant now on irrigation. But remember now, there's a winter season lying ahead. There's also a summer season lying ahead, and that's when South Africa, enjoys a lot of heat, and that in itself requires a lot of irrigation. And if you don't have electricity, it means you can lose your entire crop due to heat waves and so forth. So it's urgent that our president, together with our various ministers. Remember, we've got a Minister of Energy, we've got a Minister of Public Enterprises responsible for Eskom. Minister of Energy is responsible for getting private enterprises on board to supply electricity through solar means and so forth. And then you've got this newly appointed Minister of Electricity. So you've got 3 people already that must lead the charge against load shedding. But very little has come of their efforts, and that's a big concern for us.
All right, I want to look at the future. If none of these persons are able to solve these problems, I'm gonna use Nigeria as an example. For decades now, manufacturing companies have gotten used to sourcing alternative forms of electricity generation. Generators are a huge deal here in Nigeria, and if you look across the manufacturing companies here in Nigeria, even the ones from South Africa, they invest a lot in the electricity generators. Do you think that this might be South Africa's near future, where they depend less on the likes of Eskom and instead look out for other ways that they can generate electricity to ensure that their businesses keep running? And so tell us about other possible ways that manufacturing companies can mitigate this impending disaster in South Africa.
I cannot hear you very clearly. It seems to me it's a bit of a break on the line. But be it as it may, I think Nigeria is in a much better position in that it has a massive oil reserve. And I don't know to what extent your own businesses benefit from the oil reserves that you have. Unfortunately for South Africa, we have to import oil from the rest of the world. And the price of oil depends on the exchange rate, the dollar exchange rate. We've seen a massive spike in the price of oil and diesel, especially diesel and petrol. That was last year. Since 2015, the price of petrol went up by 100%. Price of diesel went up by almost 200%. Yes, and it fluctuates all the time. But we also have seen a massive spike in the price of electricity. So those are issues that businesses that want to invest in South Africa, want to invest on the continent of Africa, they're going to think twice before they come here. And they would rather go to a place where there's a steady supply of electricity, where there's a social order, where there's law and order, and where there is a possibility for them to make a profit. They
Very
want to
valid
see-
points, that you've raised there, Mr. Van der Rheede. But very quickly, do you foresee that these businesses that are hesitant about coming to South Africa might potentially in the future look towards generating their own electricity? Do you think that that's the direction that South Africa might be headed?
Indeed, or that's already happening. In the private sector, we have seen massive investments in own electricity. The problem is the private sector can generate much more electricity, but the transmission of electricity is the bigger challenge because Eskom's capacity on its transmission lines are limited. And that's why we as the agriculture sector are engaging with them this afternoon to see to what extent land can be made available to build more transmission lines, because it's one thing to build a massive solar plant, but if you can't transmit that electricity that's been generated over a long distance, then it serves no purpose. Because ultimately that electricity that is being generated needs to get to a client, to a business, to a customer, and to any big, business entity. So that's one of the challenges that we face, and we see ourselves as a solution provider. That's why we have these engagements with Eskom.
All right. It's a sad, picture that has been painted there, and we hope that the Cyril Ramaphosa government understands what's at stake. We've been having conversations on South African energy crisis for months now, and it's not looking good. But Mr. Van der Rheede, thank you so much for your time this morning, and we look forward to having you again and speaking with you again.
Pleasure, sir. And I trust and hope that our continent will realize that investment in infrastructure is critical for economic development. Our people require economic development so that we can lift them out of poverty.
Thank you very much. All right.